you find adventure at the click of a button, or from the turn of a page, or the casting of a die. Join your hosts, Coniff and Shiloh, on an unforgettable journey. Questing the Multiverse.
Shiloh Waltz, he did it. He finally did it. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
No.
Didn't think so.
Zero.
So, Lando Norris finally won his first Formula One race at the Miami GP, which was yesterday, if you are listening to this on recording day. If you're listening to this sometime in the future, if you're listening to this, Lando Norris, hopefully this is your first of many wins, because I'm sure he listens to some podcast that two schmucks from the Midwest put together about our favorite hobby, video games. Questing the Multiverse, episode 34. But anyway, Lando Norris beat Max Verstappen, which is a huge deal in the arena of Formula One. Max Verstappen is like, you know, in Rocky, the Russian guy, Ivan Drago or whatever his name is. That's basically Max Verstappen when it comes to Formula One. And right now, if our dear friend Swine is listening to this, he's probably got a crack up about this intro. Anyway, that's what I wanted to open this with. I've been following Lando Norris for a while. I'm a big fan of McLaren when it comes to Formula One. And for him to finally win his first race, the big deal here is that there's only been four race winners since like 2022. And that's Max Verstappen, who has won like 70% of the races in the past 3 years. Sergio Perez, another Red Bull, his teammate, a Red Bull driver. Carlos Sainz from Ferrari, who's won twice. And now Lando Norris, who has won once. So it's a big deal. Max Verstappen is like the juggernaut. He's like Michael Jordan. I'm sure some older Formula One fans from across the world are probably like, wait, yeah, there's been plenty of, Sebastian Vettel and Michael Schumacher, and I don't care. Max Verstappen is like, he's literally a machine. So the fact that Lando Norris beat him is fantastic. I'm stoked. I have a celebratory pour of whatever's back up on that shelf. Where's my thumb? It's really hard to do this there. So anyway, that was my first thing of news. Shiloh, how are you today?
I'm well. A busy week planned, but ready to talk about some games and nerdy stuff for a change, I suppose, rather than food. Or, it's funny you mentioned Ferrari. There was I guess you would call it like a convention, or not really a convention, a tour, or I don't know, whatever it is. But for some reason, the Ferrari decided to choose not just Nashville, but the little small town that I live in Dixon, for like where they were going to meet. Like all these people that own Ferraris were going to conglomerate down on Dixon, Tennessee for some reason. So there was like this huge population of Ferraris out of nowhere.
That's hilarious.
The owner of the restaurant has a bunch of pictures. I didn't care. Number one, I don't really care about cars that much, but number two, I was busy working.
You were in the kitchen while your owner. Oh, okay.
No. Actually, we were closed. So
okay,
probably a missed opportunity with the amount of money these people have. But
did you know that Ferrari, like, it's hard to buy a Ferrari? Like, you can't just contact Ferrari and be like, I would like to purchase one of your cars. If you don't have any clout, for a lack of better term, with the company, they probably won't sell you one. So you could buy secondhand, of course, but yeah, you can't just go up to Ferrari and be like, I want a custom Ferrari. And they'll be like, who are you? So a bunch of rich old folks from
evidently
Nashville,
some of them were fairly young,
probably,
I don't know, maybe inherited the car, I don't know, but yeah, whatever. That's my piece of car news, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, I have one other piece of news that we can probably talk about a bit. Mm-hmm. It's not great news as it in regards to the game that we're going to mention here. But Helldivers 2 is back in the news, and for terrible reasons. That reason being Sony, the parent company that owns whatever studio, I don't know what studio does Helldivers 2. They have now kind of put their foot down, and they're enforcing the PlayStation Network account for all Helldivers 2 players, current and future. So what this means for you, if you are a Helldivers 2 player, is that on May 30th, you will have to create a PlayStation Network account to continue playing the game that you bought. Now, there are many other companies that do this, like Nintendo or Xbox, and nobody cares, I think, because it's or like Epic might be one, Riot is another one, you know, so there are, Riot is the developer at the same time. But, you know, you have to have an account with these companies in order to play. And people don't really care. You know, you'll set up an Xbox account to play some games that are owned by Xbox. Whoop-de-doo. I think the reason this has been such a huge problem is twofold in this instance. And the first of that reason, or the first reason, is the fact that for the past few months, you didn't need this, right? So I guess at launch, the game had some technical issues that kept them from being able to enforce that, the PlayStation Network thing, and now that's been fixed, and Sony's like, you need to make it happen. And of course, you know, Helldivers 2 is kind of the current front runner for Game of the Year, and so it makes sense that Sony's trying to, you know, greedy Sony, capture more of the pie, you know, bigger piece of the pie, getting these people all on their network, or, you know, at least an account with them. So that's the first piece, is that, you know, it's now all of a sudden, like, people have been playing the game for months and this wasn't an issue, and now all of a sudden it is, and I'm going to have to stop playing. I can't play the game unless I make this account. You know, gamers, that just annoys people. But the second and probably more important reason why this is a big deal is that there are at least 177 countries where you cannot make a PlayStation Network account unless you buy a PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5. For whatever reason, Sony does not allow you to make an account in these 177 countries unless you've purchased their hardware. So now all these people that own the game in these countries, many of them are like, you know, like Afghanistan, Azerbaijan, Antarctica is one of them. So, you know, but like there's plenty of countries, people play games in those countries, and now they can't play this game because they would have to purchase a Sony console. And so because so many people have review bombed this game now on Steam, Sony has delisted the game, so you can't even purchase it in these 177 countries. The game went from being very positive on Steam to now mostly negative, which is a huge deal. Or mixed for the all-time rather than just the recent reviews. So, this is the snapshot. If you play Helldivers 2... by the end of this month, you will have to have a PlayStation Network account linked to your Steam in order to continue playing the game. If you don't, you will be met with, upon logging in, a screen that just says, please link a PlayStation Network account to play. Shiloh,
also, go on. The Yakuza will show up at your door. Or
the Pinkertons, I guess. You know, that's popular in the U.S., courtesy of Wizards of the Coast. But... what do you think of this? What do you think about this whole thing? Yeah, you haven't played Helldivers 2, and you weren't going to, but just in general.
Thought about it. Not now.
Not anymore. See, Sony, you're missing out on Shiloh, and he's a grand fella.
I hope they don't do the same thing to Destiny, which I don't think they would. But
well, so it is worth noting Helldivers 2 is only playable on Steam or PlayStation, so Sony.
Okay.
So it's not on Xbox, and I doubt it's on the Switch. So with Destiny 2, at least you have, a whole ecosystem already on Xbox.
Just a bizarre. At first I was like, well, what's the big deal? Because at first the way I interpreted the story was that PlayStation 4 or whatever you can play Helldivers on, 5 and maybe 4 Pro or whatever.
Yeah.
At first I thought that those accounts had to have PlayStation Network accounts, and I was like, well, I probably already have them if I have a PlayStation 5. But now it makes sense, and it makes sense to the fact that it doesn't make sense, and why they are. I mean, I guess it's just the fact that it's PlayStation and it's not Rockstar or it's not Riot, or because there are plenty of Ubisoft, there are plenty of these companies that almost not necessarily require you, but kind of sort of want you to go down this fill out an account sort of thing for benefits or whatever.
But they do at the upfront, and I think that's the thing. The takeaway here is like if when Helldivers 2 launched, they said you will have to have a PlayStation Network account to play it, people would have complained, because people complain, and the internet does so, and gamers do so as well. But it wouldn't be the same issue that it is now. Especially with these other countries. Yeah,
it's just unfortunate for, like, I was going to look it up, but who put out Helldivers 2 has got to have to go through all this. Yeah, it's not because their game is lackluster. It's,
no, not at all.
From what I know, it's a great game. So it's just really sad that this poor developer is having to go through all this just because Sony, wants a piece of the pie, like you said. So
unplug sound. I'm going to look it up, who the developer is, just so I can make sure we mention it on air. But for me, the problem, like, I'm not above making a PlayStation Network account. It is what's another account in the sea of accounts that I've already got as far as video games go.
Yeah.
The problem,
if you run into a problem like I might have, like if I were to buy the game and then I would have to retroactively try to find the information from my old PlayStation 4 account, and I forgot it all, and just kind of, I probably don't remember any of that information. Yeah. So
the problem the problem I have with it is that, like, I enjoy the game. I like playing the game, but I'm not currently playing the game. Right. And if I'm going to have to go through
you from
if I have to go through another hoop to play the game, then that's going to be,
and they'll probably see their numbers drop off significantly, because there are probably a lot of people like you and a lot of our friends that have kind of played the game to a point to where they're like, okay, well, maybe I'm just done,
Yes.
Just done.
Arrowhead Game Studios is the developer. And unfortunately, like you said, it's unfortunate for them. The game is great. And I was talking to Tempest today, and we've kind of talked back and forth about this idea of, when you look at the last few years of video games, it's fun to, while you're in the year, you're currently in, to try to, like, suss out what you think the game of the year is going to be as the year's going by. So if we look back at 2022, when Elden Ring came out around the same time, or some other big game. Doesn't matter, because when Elden Ring came out, we were like, this is game of the year. Like, it's going to be game of the year. And it was. So last year, obviously, there was a lot of games that came out across the whole year. But most importantly, come August 3rd, Baldur's Gate 3 releases. And then we're like, yep, this is a game of the year. It's
before
it will
that,
be an
it was
upset.
probably Remnant 2.
No, it was probably Tears of the Kingdom, I would say.
Well, yeah. I mean, from games that I could and have played, it was like, Remnant 2 might be it. But then kind of knew in the back of my mind, like, no, it's about to change really, really quickly. So.
Right. So now 2024, and, we're not even halfway through the year. And looking at all the releases, it's just like, it's Helldivers 2
Probably
was
not
the front runner. But now, as Tempest was mentioning today, this might have been the sort of the nail in that coffin for them getting it. He put it, he had a good word, and I can't remember what it was. It was very New Zealand vocabulary. It was an English word, but he said it in such a way I was like,
well, they speak English, so.
Well, I just mean it's not a word that we would have used to describe this thing in the States. But yeah, that was the point, is that, it's not. Is it going to be game of the year now? I don't know. This might have.
My guess would be
ruined their chances for it.
Unless this year is just.
Unless they write the
set up for a lot of doom and gloom. I just can't really foresee that happening. It's just sad. Yeah, just sad for Arrowhead or Arrowbreak.
Yep. Arrowhead.
Okay.
And I don't recall personally, when launching the game, ever seeing by the way, you're going to have to make a PlayStation Network account at some point in this game. I don't remember seeing that on the Steam page. I don't know. So it does feel a bit like the rug being pulled out from under everyone, because, by the way, this thing that was a technical issue at launch that we weren't going to enforce, now we have to. We fixed it, and you've got till May 30th to get this done. Again, it's really not a big issue. I would say, especially for PC gamers in countries like the United States or, the big European ones, or it's just the principle of it all, I think. And a lot of people, there's been some funny memes about it, specifically one where it's like nobody bats an eye when the same Xbox and Rockstar and Ubisoft do the same thing, but everybody loses their minds when Sony does. And it's like, yep, I don't know. Yeah. Sony's always been kind of the villain of the video game universe, I think.
Yeah. There also seems to be, from my old man perspective, so take it with a grain of salt, but is it me, or do Sony PlayStation owners generally, as a whole, they're more attuned to play games offline, or they like to have physical copies of games? That they're really kind of more kind of that collector mentality, I suppose. Maybe that's just a stereotype for kind of an anime sort of thing. I don't know, but maybe I'm just classifying.
Let's get you to bed, old man.
You lovely. Yes. You lovely Sony owners out there.
I don't know.
I own one, but I don't really care about any of that stuff. But it's probably, maybe that's just because Xbox has Game Pass, and it's, there's always been Xbox Game Pass versus PlayStation Network kind of thing, and
there's always been that rivalry. Silly. And we've always been on the team of the green, so Team Green, whatever. Yeah. I don't know. It sucks for certainly everyone in those 177 countries that now literally can't play the game that they bought. That's silly and dumb. As I mentioned, this isn't the first time Sony's done something, maybe not like this, but just done something where very anti-consumer. I do remember when Fortnite was in its original heyday, so somewhere in 2018, it was, without a shadow of a doubt, the biggest game on the planet for that whole year, pretty much. Everybody, kids, parents, grandparents, probably dead people even, I don't know, or playing it in the grave. It was that popular. And there was a point where, because Xbox and PC people could play together cross-platform, and I think PC and Sony people could play together, but the Xbox and Sony could not go together. And as I recall the story going, somebody at Epic Games accidentally turned on crossplay between PlayStation and Xbox, and PlayStation threw a fit, and Epic Games said, if you don't like it, we'll remove the game from your store. And that shut Sony up real quick, because if you're in charge of Sony Entertainment, you're not letting the biggest game of the entire, that is just selling consoles and selling things, all the time. You're not going to let them slip out of your grasp, as it were. So it is what it is. It sucks. As we mentioned already, it does kind of diminish my interest in hopping in and playing. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, good luck to Arrowhead Studios. So
yeah,
maybe
it'll
just
Sony will have a change of heart.
Yeah, you never know.
I don't know.
Probably not, but
does the devil change his heart often? Don't think so.
Nope.
So I was gonna kind of talk about what I've been playing, and then turn to you, because that's going to segue us into our main topic for this episode. First and foremost, I've been playing a lot of 3 games, and that's Final Fantasy XIV, Dead Cells, and Fortnite. So we'll talk in the reverse order. So Fortnite, they just finished up the Avatar: The Last Airbender event thing. Crossover event. Now, this is what's interesting about that game is I played it a lot when it came out. Everyone has been, Fortnite's a kid's game. I get that. It appeals to kids, but it also has a pretty fun competitive level for old folks now with zero build. So there's no building now. It's just a straight, roam around the map, collect loot, try to shoot people. That's what I play. I don't do the building. I am much too old for it. I mean, I'm really not, but I can't compete with teenagers. So me and some college friends and some friends of friends, we play the zero build, and the Avatar event was happening, and you could collect different airbending, firebending, earthbending, waterbending scrolls. They were a lot of fun to use. They had the characters that you could play as if you purchased them, because this is Fortnite. Ton of fun. They've also done Fortnite Festival, which is Rock Band, and as our listeners know, I'm a big fan of that. I played a lot of Guitar Hero. And so Fortnite has kind of become this game where I look at I get home from work, the kids are asleep, the wife's asleep, and I'm like, do I want to play the main story quest of Final Fantasy XIV, or do I want to shut my brain off and play Fortnite? And that's, so that's kind of the question there. A lot of fun. They're now doing a Star Wars crossover event, so you can find Darth Vader on the map, but if you defeat him, you get his lightsaber that you can use and whatever. The other game, it'll move to Dead Cells. Dead Cells is a roguelite. You run through, the stages are, I guess, randomly generated. Although many of them are the same a lot of times, or there's a few that are the exact same layout each time, or close to it. And you got one life. You try to go from the beginning and beat the final boss, and if you do, you win. If you don't, you start over. But the things you unlock as you're playing are collective, so you might go through a run, unlock an item, a blueprint for an item. You get to the sort of the safe zone that's in between each level, and then you've saved it, and then if you die, was still unlocked, and you can use it and stuff. Ton of fun. That's if I really don't want to think, because Dead Cells is a lot about, there's thinking involved, like what you're going to take, what scrolls you're going to take. Like, do I want to level up my attack power, sort of my utility power, or more of my like health power? So there's some thought that goes into it. But if I'm just not wanting to talk to people or anything, or really want to just shut my brain off, I will likely be in Dead Cells, because it's just get a controller and go. So if I then want to use my brain a little bit, I will turn to Final Fantasy XIV. And as of currently, the recording of this episode, I only have 17 quests left of Heavensward, or before Heavensward. So the in-between from A Realm Reborn to Heavensward. Shiloh, right. There are 80 quests, main story quests, between you level 50 and you finish the base game to the first expansion. So what I wanted to kind of ask you in our little, sort of pseudo what you've been up to intro here, when you consider all the MMOs you've played, which one do you think has the most content between finishing the base game and then the first expansion?
Well, I mean,
and I'm not like it's not like a leading question to get you to say Final Fantasy XIV. I'm genuinely curious, because you can help me think about this too, because ESO, I'm thinking like you get to level 50 and then the champion point system starts.
Yeah.
But,
well, if you're thinking about, because ESO's been through a good number of changes with One Tamriel and
post One Tamriel,
their first expansion, I guess you could call Hrothgar, which wasn't really quote unquote an expansion, but it was something different.
Well, once you finish
but there wasn't a lot of questing to build up a story like there is in Final Fantasy. I can't really think of anything. I guess you could say
Living World 1 and 2 of Guild Wars 2, maybe?
Yeah, but there was a long gap between Guild Wars 2 vanilla launch to Heart of Thorns. So
yeah.
And really, the studio didn't really pick up pacing.
It was only a few years, I think. Oh, no, it was like 3 years, wasn't it? Because 2012 to 2015, I believe.
I think so. Yeah. So, and they didn't really pick up the pacing for that until, Living World Season 3, 4.
Yeah.
Then that's when they kind of hit their stride, I think. So, yeah, I guess you could say, well, is content that's excellent between, and I'm not saying that the content between, because it does get better, like the content from the MSQ, sorry Weevil, the main story quest from Final Fantasy XIV leading towards Heavensward does not exponentially, but it does gradually increase in quality, or at least in enjoyability, in my opinion, from that to Heavensward, and then it gets better from then on out. But
I was going to agree with you. From level 1 to 50 is, well, I haven't done it, so it's hard to say. But I did ask Tempest to rank the stories. So far, I would say 50 to 60, which is effectively the 2 7th Astral era quest lines. It's called A Realm Reborn Part 5 and Part 6. That so far the 80 quests between level 50 and then Heavensward have been way better than 1 to 50 in A Realm Reborn. I think just the stakes are higher, and the fact that you've got more time with the characters. I guess
investment.
like
you have your own personal memories of things in the game to kind of back the story that they're telling, rather than just telling all this story. And you're like, I don't know. Like,
yeah,
I just made this character literally an hour ago. I don't have any investment whatsoever in this.
Also, like a lot of, I know that like I haven't read them, but the Stormlight Archives, a lot of people say the second book is just phenomenal compared to the first one. I know that like I'm pointing to it. Nope. It was down here somewhere on the shelf. You'll see a line of Star Wars books for our YouTube viewers, and there's one that says Shadow of the Sith in red. It's really hard to do this reverse. But a few books prior to that is the start of the High Republic era novels, Light of the Jedi. And Light of the Jedi was okay. And of course, this is Disney era, so say what you will about Disney canon. Who cares? But Light of the Jedi was great. And then I'm going to have to look. Light of the Jedi. All right. It sets up the story. But Rising Storm was like significantly better than it. The same thing. I was going to say the same for Lord of the Rings, but I think all those three books are pretty much equally loved. I know that I loved Two Towers more than Fellowship of the Ring. But yeah, so it's the sophomore edition of things a lot of times is really, really good. Or the second iteration, because the characters are established and the writers are really able to delve into things. And I feel that way certainly with this post A Realm Reborn base game sequences or stuff, I guess. Excuse me. I don't know if Guild Wars 2 is the other one, and like WoW, I don't really know. WoW doesn't do the same type of story updates in between expansions that Guild Wars 2 originally did, or what's it called? Final Fantasy. But then ESO also did those mini expansions. So originally, we got the Gold Coast with the Assassins Guild, or the Brotherhood of Darkness, or Brotherhood of whatever it was. What is it called?
The Dark Brotherhood.
The Dark Brotherhood. I've been so far removed from it. But anyway, this is ultimately going to segue us into what you have been playing and our main concept or main discussion of this episode, which is Destiny, which has kind of turned to this model of releasing an expansion, and then each season builds upon that story in some way, and then there's the next expansion. So,
well, but they're getting
ready to change that, right?
Yeah, they're getting ready to change that after the final shape. So they're going to do episodes after that, so we can get away with seasons altogether.
Maybe that'll be good for them. Who knows?
I don't know.
But
whatever.
Let's kick into it, I guess.
All right.
Guardian. Eyes up, Guardian. It worked. You're alive.
So that was Peter Dinklage, listener, if you didn't know.
The Dinkles.
The Dinkelberg, the original ghost of Destiny. Shiloh, why did he end up stepping down? Was it Game of Thrones? No, Game of Thrones wasn't out. Or maybe it was.
I don't think so. Well, maybe. Or maybe pre-production. Could have been. Who knows?
But they replaced him. They replaced his voiceover lines. And I don't know who the new guy is, because
don't know.
The Dinklebot is what we remember from the original days of Destiny. So, for those who are listening to this show, I am currently not playing Destiny 2. Shiloh here is with our dear friends, Prophetic Swine, Dr. Fat Dang PhD, and P. Maddie. Is Bonicles playing? Am I missing anybody else that I need to shout out?
Barnacles.
So you're doing raids or dungeons, and he's getting all the god rolls, and the rest of you are foaming at the mouth.
And Swine and I are just sitting there in the corner crying.
So I may have mentioned it already.
The doctor's just mad.
But Barnacles' first time in Vault of Glass gets Vex Mythoclass. First ever dungeon or raid run in Destiny 2. One time, gets the drop, bounces out.
Yep.
And many
Deuces
people wept that night. So
yeah.
Anyway, I'll turn it to you now.
Oh yeah. So yeah, I had very little expectation or idea that I was ever going to get back into Destiny after Lightfall. I think I played a little bit, just because in the past I've bought the $100 package every time Destiny. Well, not every time, but most of the times Destiny's come out with something, because it comes with their season pass, which basically gets you through a whole year of content. You don't have to worry about them nickel-and-diming you over dungeons and content and stuff like that. So I'm like, okay, let's just pay the $100, and if I like it, then so be it. Well, after Lightfall, which was a pretty big disappointment in my book, probably in a lot of people's books, even though their numbers were through the roof for Lightfall, and that's probably because of that they came off the tails of the Witch Queen, which was a really pretty solid expansion for them.
Yeah.
And after Lightfall, the numbers have basically dwindled down to nothing. I don't know if we've commented on the show over it, but it was looking pretty bad for the
Bungie.
folks at Bungie. I had to sell the farm and go to Sony, that we've already mentioned, yeah, well, things are not looking good.
If we can reminisce a little, why don't you take us through your initial? I'm talking Destiny 1. Your initial play of, because you played Destiny 1, right? Or am I jumping?
Yes,
okay.
Retroactively though.
So take us
Destiny 2 first. So
take us through just what drew you to the game originally, and your first experiences with the world that, like, honestly, even though we have really not liked it recently, and me more so, honestly, like, it's a very fun IP, a fun world, a fun science fiction fantasy universe. So what was your first?
I think the first thing that drew me to Destiny 2, because that was the first Destiny that I played.
Yep.
And I pre-ordered the game on Xbox 360, I think is when it first came out. Does that sound about right?
No, because it came out 2017 or 2018.
Maybe it was an Xbox.
It was Xbox
X One. Or one, yeah. So I pre-ordered it for the One, and I remember the first thing that drew my attention was a lot of their live action commercials that I still think are pretty great and funny, sort of in a weird way, just because you wouldn't see that in modern day, which what's funny we call modern day, which is only 7 years ago, but the live action commercial that they would run with the Immigrant Song by Led Zeppelin playing in the background when the Guardians are going down that pit, and like I guess it's Hive or Fallen, I can't remember who the enemies were at the time, doesn't really matter. But yeah, I was like, okay, I kind of dig this. And then they had, for some reason, Destiny 1 just kind of escaped my radar, but I was kind of pulled into that, and I played a little bit right off the bat, and I think I just kind of dropped it. I didn't have any friends that played the game, so I think I got my Guardian up to some random arbitrary number of levels and just kind of stopped playing.
That was the level system, huh?
Yeah, still had to level to 20, I think it was, which wasn't a big deal, but
at the beginning.
But yeah, I just quit playing just because I think I remember there was a strike where it was kind of a sort of my first little strike that I had to do, and there was a little like a puzzle part of it or something, and I kept dying, and I mean I knew why, but I couldn't get past it, and I just got frustrated. I think I turned it off and I never plugged it back in. And to this day, I still struggle sometimes with these puzzles and jumping and stuff, but I've gotten better. But yeah, it was, I think it really was, it was that idea of I could play a first person shooter in a kind of space fantasy, almost not Firefly or Star Wars, but that sort of feel where I had a little bit of magic, but I still got to play around with guns and stuff like that. So it was like, okay.
Yeah, I really like that it's more fantasy than, it's not like Mass Effect science fiction. It's, you can see in Halo, obviously Bungie creating Halo as well, you can see where Halo starts to get more into the fantasy realm, especially in, I think it's, 2, there's some of it, but then 3 with the Hive, I don't know, whatever it is. I'm not a Halo nerd, so to your point, it is definitely that fantasy. There's that magic, and I think that's really what sets it apart.
Yeah, and but on my second retry, that's when I really got into Destiny 2, and started playing with you and our old friend Timmy,
Timmy,
and would run around and try to get through the Forsaken campaign. Like I basically didn't remember any of the Red War campaign, so I think we went through and did all of that, and then got all the way up to did the what was the Warmind expansion, and
the Osiris
the Mercury one, not Trials of Osiris, what was it called? Something of Osiris. That
was the first one, and then it was
the one with Mercury. Yeah. It wasn't very.
It was all right. It was okay.
Yeah. Had a lot of weird weapon grinding to do. I had to do for the Wayfarer
that
title,
Black Armory or whatever it was at one point.
Yeah, that was past. That was pre Forsaken, I think. But yeah, I think that's when they started to get the gears grinding, and then Forsaken came out, and that kind of blew the lid off a lot of people. So that's when, of course, you can't play any of this old stuff anymore.
I know, we're talking about this, and we wanted to take this episode. We're going to do a few, I think 3 Destiny episodes for now, but we wanted to take this one as a reminiscent one, just to look back at what we enjoyed. And it's kind of bittersweet because we can think about all this stuff, but we can't play it.
But you, listener, can't go, oh, I want to play that. You kind of can't.
Sorry.
They've made some, I think originally when they sunsetted a lot of stuff, the idea was to bring back some of these old planets, and they've done a little bit of that. Like they brought back Titan to a degree when Season of the Deep, which that season is, but they've, I think I did a strike that was on Mars, which kind of takes you through, and I'm like, the old protocol days, and you'd have the
a newer one,
a newer strike. So they've done some of that stuff, and they take you back to old planets.
Well, as you mentioned, they brought 0 Hour back, and then
not yet, but we did do. Swan and I did the Whisper mission with.
They brought that back
with Doctor. Yeah, and now the weapon is craftable, and you can kind of, I like what they've done really with bringing these missions back. It's kind of fun. I'll probably go back and do 0 Hour just to beat my head against the wall a few more times. But yeah, they've, in thinking about it, I guess it is kind of sad that they've had to, or didn't have to, but they did sunset a lot of this old content. But, I think at this point, they've kind of, they know their player base is going to be, they're not going to get a whole lot of new people because it's a really hard game to kind of come into with as a new player and really know, one, what to do, two, what you're looking for without just doing a ton of research or having a friend kind of guide you along and know, like, say, okay, this is what the god roll for this is. And I still don't know like half of these things, but I'll do research and try to at least figure it out. What everyone's using and what's a primary and what's a special weapon, all these things that, a newer player would just be like, I don't know any of this stuff. Like, it's got a shield and it's blue. What should I blast it with this void weapon? Like, no, you have to match, that sort of thing. It just doesn't really come, it's not very intuitive, I suppose, into something. They don't really do a super great job of teaching or having a real, tutorial for newer players, but, well, it is what it is at this point. I think it's probably at the end of its rope. I mean, the final shape, I think it is pretty much what it is. And there's been a lot of rumors that Destiny 3 is down the pipeline at some point. So, because this is going to end, the final shape is going to end the whole Light and Darkness saga,
which has been going for over 10 years at this point.
So. Right. As in Guild Wars 2 is in the same boat where they've ended their cycle of the dragon. So what do these two franchises do after these big epic long stories? And I think they're both kind of trying to figure that out. And probably that's why these Guild Wars 2 to Guild Wars 3 and Destiny 2 to Destiny 3 rumors are starting to escalate. And these games are getting longer in the tooth. They have engines that probably need to be scrapped and go to a different one. But anyway, all that aside, I think initially it was those commercials. There was several of them, but that's the one I remember most vividly was the Immigrant Song Destiny promo, and I think there was one that had Kate in it. It's just
The only one I remember is the Moon one, which was like the very first one for Destiny 1.
Yeah.
But to some of your points here, it is interesting to see where they're gonna go with it, and we'll dedicate an episode to the discussion of what we think the future of the franchise looks like, just as players. But for my experiences with Destiny, I actually started in D1, and I started very soon after the Dark Below, I think is what it was called, when they first introduced Crota's End as Vaults of Glass was the base game raid, I think. So Crota's End would have been the second one. And it was Destiny 1. I played it on, maybe it was a PlayStation, I don't know. But it was at my parents' house over a Christmas break I was there for like 2 or 3 weeks. And they had moved to a new state. I had no friends in that state. It's Christmas, everyone's sleeping, holiday, you're not doing anything. I literally played that game the entire time and went from level 1 to 30, which was the max in that game. And I even was trying to do the whole Crota's End first chest farm. So you fight through the initial bad guys, you leap down into the Hellmouth, and then it's pitch black. And then you start getting the thralls or whatever they're called that just start swarming you. And the grind was that you could run off to the side, find the first chest, and then loot it and then leave. And then there's a way you could do it to farm it that didn't require a reset. It might have been by character. I don't know. But anyway, that was my very first experience, and I really loved the gameplay of the whole thing. It didn't bother me back then that, you know, you had to group with people for strikes. And some of the open world events, you like obviously needed other players. To me, it was like a novel thing because, you know, Halo, if you wanted to play through the story with somebody, you know, it was a closed environment. You're playing through these story missions. Well, this was, you know, totally different. You would get random people. So really neat experience in whenever this was. And I remember just absolutely loving like the gameplay of that. It was a first person shooter, but had all these great story moments. I remember on the moon specifically, some mission in which you end up in this room, and in the middle of the room, this room is like this altar, and then all these wizards spawn and you have to fight them. And then there was this giant ogre even deeper into the moon. And I thought it was really neat how it was, you know, all this interconnected story and interconnected areas. Like you would pass through that altar room to get to the ogre room on a different mission. And I didn't really understand the concept that some of these were strikes and some of these weren't. And frankly, it was so different back then. I don't even remember if what I'm remembering is correct. I do remember there was the factions that you could join. So the future, what was it?
The future
Dead Orbit's
war,
one of them. Future War
Cult.
Yep. Dead Orbit's another. There's a few others.
New Monarchs.
Yep. And doing so, you could level up their reward tracks. One thing I remember from this era that I maintain as an opinion to this day is that for some reason, the systems in Destiny 2 are just hard to understand. Like you open up a vendor and it doesn't make sense how you buy the stuff. Sometimes it takes a currency that you're like, I don't know what that is. No idea. And it doesn't tell you where that is, or it didn't. And I was going to make that point when you were talking about the crafting of the Whisper of the Worm mission, or the sniper rifle, of how when they introduced crafting with the Witch Queen expansion, I remember the four of us, including P. Matty, but you, myself, and Prophetic Swine, were looking at this and we're like, I don't understand this. Like, how does this crafting doesn't make sense. And for some reason, I have felt that way about multiple systems with Destiny 2. And I think that's because in my head, I'm playing a first-person shooter with story elements. But mechanically and on paper, Destiny 2 is actually like an MMORPG. And Bungie has said, you know, they've made the claim that this is an MMO, so that's not news to anybody. But the way they've designed it, you know, as you were mentioning, God rolls. Well, what other games have God rolls that you would need? MMOs, any multiplayer game with PvP and PvE where you're fighting bosses.
Yeah, there's randomized loot.
There's dungeons, raids, strikes.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird, contradictory systems in Destiny 2. For instance, we were just talking about crafting. They also have a collections thing where you can pull out previous things that you've gotten in game, whether it be exotic armor, ships, emblems, even some guns. However, now this is where things get interesting. Most guns have randomized rolls. The only ones that you can pull out of this collections menu of these these pages of guns that you've collected over time are the ones with just fixed rolls, which is not rolls. Many. And not good. So where I don't understand, like, why is that even in the game anymore? Like, they just take that out. And if you want to put crafting in the game, great. I think it's a pretty good idea as a whole. But you need to make almost everything craftable, if you're going to do that. And I know that, this has been something they've been working on, and, it's a fairly new system and they're trying to get everything caught up. But, moving forward to Destiny 3 would be nice for them to just say, okay. And I think that's exactly your point, which is, I think initially they didn't really know exactly where to, and that's not necessarily a bad problem, because it does cater to both audiences. I think it caters a little bit to that first person shooter, even some PvP,
which is what drew us in on it. Well, myself and Swine. And,
not the PvP part for me, but that element, but also having that MMO type of element. And so where do you kind of blend the two and have that nice, kind of mixture of, to kind of appease the player base, or, and maybe in the future, make it kind of known, okay, this is the path we're going to go down. These are the systems we're going to implement.
Yes.
This is the way it's going to be. And you can go yay or nay. And, I think that most people would go yay, but, it is what it is.
Yeah. So that's where, I was loving the game. Destiny 1, loved it. Eventually, obviously, I had to go back to my life and, away from Christmas vacation, and so that's where that ended. And I never really came back.
That was a quick Destiny 1.
Yeah, but I played so much. Like I said, I was level 30, and
it wasn't easy to get to level 30 in that game. From what I remember,
wasn't. I had done the whole main story, had done several strikes, never did Vaults of Glass. I didn't really understand the concept of a raid back then, because remember, at this point, I hadn't played ESO, and so my only MMO experience was RuneScape. And RuneScape's content at the time, prior to this, but the hardest content I'd ever done was the God Wars dungeon, which was, I don't even know how I would translate this. It'd be effectively like in Final Fantasy XIV, you go and fight the primals, like just the one-off fights, and try to get them. That's kind of what the God Wars dungeons was. And so I had no idea. And Vaults of Glass, once I remember looking it up and hearing that there were all these puzzles and I think they were talking about the world's first race or something, and it took 20 hours to beat, and I was like, yep, no, that's gonna rule me out. And I didn't ever look into that further. So then when we started playing Destiny 2, which I think was a good time that we started. Of course, it was with the release of arguably the best expansion Destiny 2 seen with the Forsaken. But of course, back then we had to start with the Red War, level up to level 50 or 40 or something. It was high. You had to get all the way through that, unlock your other subclasses, and that was a whole adventure. And then you'd go into I do want to say Trials of Osiris. I don't remember what it's called. You do
Crucible?
that campaign. No.
Oh.
No, I mean the expansion, whatever it was.
What was that damn thing called?
And then
I just call it Osiris Mercury something.
And it was all right, like we said earlier. But then you get to the Warmind DLC, and you have to do all that, and that was fun. And that has actually probably my favorite strike in the entire game to this point.
Savathun's Song?
No. No, the other one with Zol. Savathun's Song was fun, though.
Or not Titan.
No, it's Titan. Mars. Both of those were Mars. No, Savathun's Song was the one on Titan. You're thinking of the other big wizard, and that one's on Mars. The one my favorite one is on Mars as well. You're going and you fight Zol at the end, which was really neat. One of the worms.
Okay. Yeah.
Don't remember what it was called, but that was really fun. And then, of course, at that point, then you get up to the Forsaken DLC, and you go through that. And it was just a ton of fun. You had to put in some work, and you kind of learned the game along the way, and that helped. But like we mentioned, like I think the Black Armory was a part of the game then, and I just didn't understand that. At some point during this time, I unlocked the Recluse through PvP. Didn't realize it was God tier in PvE until a little bit later, and really enjoyed that. But yeah, so this, I mean, it's just like, I love everything in Destiny. I think is great. Like, certainly story-wise and lore-wise, like, it's one of the few science fiction or space fantasy IPs that I think really interests me that's not Star Wars. And even, like, mechanically, like, I like the idea, you know, we're talking about pulling stuff out of your collections sucks, but, like, the idea of God rolls on weapons, the idea of crafting weapons, like all this stuff I find really cool. Like even the collections aspect, like you said, like, yep, I can go pull out this weapon or whatever that I've collected. I love all of that, but for whatever reason, I feel like it's just implemented in a way that doesn't click with me in a lot of places. Of course, that never stopped me from playing. What it meant is I just felt like I didn't understand when I like I was relying on websites and stuff to be like, yes, you have a God roll in your vault. That's the weapon you should use. And I'd go and put it on and be like, okay, I guess. But then in some cases we would go and try to do the master level strikes and we're just struggling. And we're like, well, we've got all this good stuff. And so there were just some parts of the game that never clicked with my understanding, I guess. And I think that might be because, like I said earlier, I was stuck in this mindset that I'm playing an FPS game, but really it's a...
You need to, there are a lot of... they've done a little bit of simplifying a lot of that stuff. There used to be a lot of freedom in build crafting and mod farming and
the mods,
and there was there was a lot of different they had different elements, different attuned elements on each set of armor, like each piece of armor. So if you wanted a certain mod, you needed to have a certain arc or solar or void, just type of armor piece, just to put that mod on that piece of armor. It was very, very complicated, and they've since done away with all of that. So every armor is just basically set stats, and the mods are fairly simple. There's no mod farming anymore. Everyone has basically a collection of mods that you can select, and of course, those mods cost different amounts, and so you're trying to battle, that, but. Yeah, I could see that. I don't think it's anywhere near the complexity of Guild Wars 2 as far as crafting and sort of
crafting for sure. I just but like for Destiny or Guild Wars 2, because it's a horizontal progression, once you've got that not legendary but exotic, whatever's underneath the legendary, exotic Ascended. Maybe. Oh, Ascended, that's right. Once you've got like Ascended pieces in almost every slot, and they're in the stats that are the meta for your character, it's like, okay, I'm good. And for me personally, with Guild Wars 2, as an elementalist, I had an Ascended Scepter and an Ascended Dagger. Did I use a dagger? Yeah, Ascended Scepter and Dagger since before Path of Fire. I started the Path of Fire DLC, I think, like since Living World Season 3, because 3, Path of Fire 4. And I mean, I had Ascended rings, trinkets, cape, all that stuff, and then did Path of Fire, then did Living World Season 4, then did Living World Season 5, then did End of Dragons, then did the current Karsus or whatever it's called stuff. And so it's like, okay, I did all that, and I knew that goal from the beginning. But with Destiny 2, it's like, because they had the different like the different things in the strikes, the modifiers. It's kind of like the affixes in WoW. Yeah.
Yeah.
It just changes all the time. I mean, you remember when Witherhoard was the king and everybody was running Witherhoard, and it was a fantastic... I remember we used to farm the Master Strikes. I don't think we did Grandmaster. We did a few Grandmaster, but we were farming Masters for the Ascendant Shards because that was... We were able to clean, especially like a specific week when it was one of the ones on Io. No, not Io. The other Nessus with the Milk Waterfall, the Vex Milk Waterfall.
Oh yeah,
we were farming that one, and it was great. And so my next question to you, as we are thinking back on this, when do you feel like your character was the most powerful, your tune? Like, when did you have the best weapons and the best armor, and you felt like you had basically like the end game setup for your warlock or hunt or whatever you were playing? Like, at what point, if you can remember, do you think that was for you?
Probably not until... Witch Queen era, I think. It took about that long for me to kind of everything to sort of click.
You would say that even instead of the
Maybe
season of the Splicer?
Light.
Yeah, when we were farming Vaults of Glass and...
yeah, I guess so. Yeah, maybe around that time, I suppose. I think that things were starting to come together in my head about how, okay, this is how I build this, and I can build this sort of thing. And, you know, I've never been good at PvP, so that's kind of out of the question. But as long as I'm good enough in PvE, I'm okay with that.
It was during...
I think I'm pretty good.
It was during that Splicer era in which all of my armor pieces and all of my weapons were, what is it called when they have the gold border around them?
Oh, it's like mastercrafted.
Mastercrafted. I had all the armor pieces for my hunter mastercraft. It was for the blade dancer, I think, because I would only do the high noon gun during the PvP, but blade dancer for... Oh no, I guess I would do that one shot because I had that eagle helmet. And
I mean golden gun.
Yeah, and then golden for Vex, you'd shoot your ultimate, and hope you hit the crit spot for like fat damage. But for me, the answer to that question would be the season of the Splicer. I think when we were farming that Splicer event, whatever it was called.
Yeah, the Tron area.
Yes, or you'd do that mission where you'd have to go unlock something, and then you'd get teleported to fight a big Vex thing, and you had to get through a mini jumping puzzle, and first person to do that would hit the button. It would tell, all that fun stuff. Yeah. But because we were also doing Vaults of Glass, like I said, all my gear and weapons were masterworked. I had Vex Mythoclass and had that masterworked, and so it was just, fun stuff. Yeah. But I don't know. What is your favorite strike of all time?
Strike?
Yeah. I know there's a lot, but like, is there any one that is like, man, I really like the fight in this, the final boss fight, or just the environment? Because as you have said before on old GG Party Chat, Destiny 2 and Bungie are really great at like set pieces and just like the way things look and the experience of it.
Yeah. If we're not talking about, if you're just talking about strikes as a whole. Man, that's a tough one. I think Savathun's song, for some reason, although that strike near the end, especially
people hated it,
in
apparently.
Nightfalls, it could get really brutal. But that strike, for some reason, it always struck a chord with me. I think it's because you start out, you're basically going through what could be like almost like a space shopping mall full of hive, and then eventually you end up
Titan,
like down on the tunnels, and then you end up in this weird hive infested, I don't even know what it is, and that strike for some reason, and they're all the while Savathun is singing her little song.
Yep.
I wish I could remember the song and how it goes, but I feel like if I do, she'd appear.
She'd appear and you would be dead.
Perhaps. Be her or Eris. I don't know which one.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's but the set pieces in Destiny 2 are just still like sometimes like we just did Warlord's Ruin, which is fairly new dungeon. I don't think it's the newest dungeon, but it's incredible looking. It's got a sort of a medieval Fellwinter. It's in the EDZ, so it's on Earth, but it's in the mountains, and it's up on. There's like a sort of a dungeon-ish castle sort of vibe to it, but not like a Savathun hive castle, but like a more of a medieval castle sort of vibe to it, except it's infested with Taken, and it's pretty wild. It's really, really cool. Very, 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 very pretty. And then of course you've got things like, of course, Deepstone Crypt, which is probably one of my favorite experiences of all time in any video game, is that raid and the music and kind of going through that. And then the most recent example is the Witch Queen raid with Rolk, and seeing like those when you're inside the pyramid ship and you see like
way off in the distance and the dead worm that's all the weird stuff that's going on in there, and the there's just so many good set pieces that they do. And I've seen pictures of the new raid and the new, not necessarily new raid, I'm sorry, I don't think that has been disclosed at all, but some of the new pictures of and scenes from the final shape, and it just looks amazing. So I'm pretty excited about that. But what about your favorite planet of all time in Destiny 2?
What's your favorite planet?
What's your favorite planet? Pluto?
Mine's the sun. It's technically not a planet. It doesn't matter. When that thing blows, we're all gonna die. So
you best show it some respect. Favorite planet in Destiny 2?
I don't know if you can call it a planet, but it would probably be the Dreaming City. It's not really a planet.
Yeah,
but,
that's no surprise, though. You have famously been all about...
Yeah, I still go there just to putz around.
Mars,
it's kind of my go-to. Mars was my favorite. Well, Mars was kind of my go-to for weapon bounties. And
the original Mars was great with that event that was in the
Escalation Protocol.
Yes, where you defend like those points. I think that's the Clovis Bray something facility. And then you fight the big thing over on the landing
changes
pad area.
weekly. Yeah, I did that way too many times.
I loved that, but yeah,
because you would go there to farm all the Aquilos weapons, and it was a lot of fun. I would have to say Dreaming City.
I always really liked Titan, and it's because in Destiny 1, I feel like, you are introduced to the Hive very quick.
I think that's what that whole line, like Eyes Up Guardian.
Exactly. No, that's the Fallen. But you're introduced to the Hive early on because you're going through this dark section, and the ghost comes out with the light, and then you start to hear things and whatever. But looking back, like Bungie, I remember when you first are introduced to the Flood in Halo 1, and you're seeing that recording from Sergeant Johnson and somebody else in Master Chief's helmet, and then you're going through this swamp and into this facility, and then all of a sudden, the Flood. Like, that was a really neat moment. And so Destiny 2, and I was like, okay, like, how are they going to introduce the Hive again? Because obviously Destiny 2, and the main focus was Gaul and, not Gaul. Was it Gaul?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the Red War.
And the Red War taking away Guardian's light. And so that whole first mission, you're at the tower, the old tower. It's being, decimated. Ikora does her warlock thing and blows up something, and you see Zavala do bubble, and Cade 6 golden guns. They showcased each of the three, and then of course Gaul captures the Traveler and then tosses you from his ship.
Yeah. Oh, they're not the Traveler, but the Speaker. That is his name.
No, that's a Traveler. He does that to the Speaker, but I mean, he captures the Traveler with that.
Oh, yeah.
That thing, whatever it is. And then he tosses you from his ship. And then I really liked the missions when you didn't have it and you were going through the wilderness and there were like the wolves and whatever. But I say all this because up until this point, you haven't seen the Hive at all. And I remember the first time in Destiny 2 you meet the Hive originally was on Titan. And you go to Titan for some reason. And then you're going through these under platforms of like these rigs, and then they start to appear, and it was really creepy how they did it. And so I've always loved stuff like that, and so Titan was my favorite planet, and then they got rid of it, and I was sad. And then I think probably after that it was the Forsaken. What was that called? Not the Dreaming City, the other one.
Oh, the Shattered Veil.
No.
Shattered Throat. Shattered Skull.
No, yeah, what is it? It's that asteroid field. But to be fair, when they removed all the old content, we were basically left with the DMZ, or whatever it's called. I think the Cosmodrome got brought back for that. Europa, and then the Moon, and then Nessus. And so none of my favorite places remained. I really liked Io, or I thought it was at least interesting, and that's where you originally would do the Whisper of the Worm mission. Of course, 0 Hour would take place on Earth at the tower. Loved that mission. What's the Far Shore, the Forgotten Shore, the something shore?
Oh, I pulled this up. The reef is, I guess, what? Yeah,
that's
that
the one.
area.
Very cool. That's probably my favorite. I like you.
Best lost sector in the game was the jukebox, the fallen jukebox one.
Yeah,
it was great.
So, no, what were you going to say?
Oh, no, go on.
I was just going to, as we're close to wrapping up this episode, I was just going to say that, like, when you really sit down and look back at kind of the history of Destiny, excluding all, like, the bad stuff, like, the being free from Sony, or not Sony, being free from Activision, and then on their own for a while and kind of trying to keep their head above water, and then getting purchased by Sony, and there's a lot of decisions in there, the meta things with video game development that were not great, but you look back at like just the experience, and that's why, like, I still to this day really love the world. As I've said before, the only thing holding me back from playing it is ultimately how much money I'd have to spend to be able to play it on PC and get all the content. Because I could just play, I think you can play your same characters, so I'd be able to play my hunter, but...
Yeah, and you'd probably be all caught up, really.
I know
you would have
a
to
few
go,
hundred light behind, I'm sure, at this point. What is the
Well,
light
that wouldn't
level?
matter. Like there's in game now, like there's a complete catch-up thing, a free chest for Into the Light, which is free for everyone. It doesn't, you don't need Lightfall or anything. That's the current Brave Weapon Onslaught, the Horde mode thing, that what they've re-released, Recluse, Mountaintop.
Yeah.
Some of the old Black Armory weapons, Blast Furnace, Hammerhead, Fallen Guillotine, some of the kind of like classics of
Blast Furnace.
Of Destiny 2's history. And then you open up a chest and it's all 1810 gear, so it's like the current power cap.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think when I was talking earlier about the most powerful I felt was 1330, because that was when the cap, I believe, was 1320, and then the hard cap was 1330. So like 1310 was, all right, you're at light level, and then 13 up to 1320 is you're actually leveling it, and then you got to 1320, and then the only way you could get higher was with your artifact, I think it was, or whatever
artifact
the thing was.
or pinnacle rewards.
Yeah. And so that was where I maxed out that season and was 1330. And I remember that I had the dinosaur outfit for Hunter. So I don't know.
The dinosaur.
Yeah, it was fun. But
it's been a lot of fun getting back into it. And I think mainly it's because I wouldn't be probably even still playing if it were just me, going around doing stuff. But the fact that I can jump in and Swine and Maddie and I did, we did Prophecy, and then we did the Warlord's Ruin, and then Swine had something come up, probably a child, I think he's teething. So Doctor had to jump in, like we were in mid-boss, like the last boss fight, and Swine had to jump. The Doctor jumped in the middle of the fight, and we ended up clearing it. But
cleaned
it was
house, as he does.
Yeah, but it was funny. It was a good time. But it's stuff like that. It's like just keep playing. Well, why not? It's been fun. And I've been going back on my Hunter now and doing Season of the Witch, which is it's been kind of cool to go back and do this previous season. It's actually 2 seasons ago, I think. I think it was, I don't know. The timeline has kind of thrown me off a little bit on what I've done previous and what I haven't. But Season of the Witch, obviously involves Eris Morn and Savathun, even though, spoiler alert, Savathun evidently dies at the end of The Witch Queen, if you didn't know.
Does she, though?
She didn't really. So it's this whole involving Eris, but it's really, really interesting and kind of cool. But has this whole, they did a little bit something different with the seasons, where you, instead of bounties that you collect for the season, you basically, it's almost like a card thing, like the deck of many things of all things. But, and you collect these, you basically fill out and do these quests, these little mini quests, and it's like whole list of cards, and you do kind of go through the story, and you kind of unlock cards and which are little mini quests that you do, and then you unlock a card, and in your season room, which is this little weird little area of the helm, and it's but you have, I'm guessing, I haven't really gotten that far in the season, but you unlock these cards that appears almost like these holographic images around this weird little creepy gazebo that Eris has built in this creepy land. And I'm guessing you can kind of pick your buffs eventually once you get 5 cards minimum. And like these cards have different buffs, and I don't know exactly how it works, but
see, that's what I'm saying. It's this stuff where it's like, it feels like it's just bizarrely confusing. It's like, oh, I like the idea, but it's like, man, just I don't know, put like tooltips that explain everything right there or something where it's like, oh yeah, this is
well,
this.
I'd probably skip past that anyway and then just watch a video like most people.
That's
like,
fair.
I don't care about that. This is dialogue. But I do listen to dialogue in Destiny too, for the most part, unless I've already heard it. But yeah, that's and I'm really hoping that they really need to knock the final shape out of the ballpark because they're going to really lose a lot of people. With the ill will that I think a lot of people had with the with Lightfall, but I think the community seems as a whole to be pretty positive in this going forward. So, I've always said that I wanted to play it one last time as kind of a last hurrah, and the fact that Cade is coming back in some weird fashion, probably as a kind of almost a resurrected ghost. Excuse the pun, but considering his ghost got smashed, that's why he's no longer with
the whole ordeal.
Sniff. But it's fun because the game, it takes itself seriously, but it also has some light humor in it. The cast of characters are really likable for the most part. Even if you don't like them, you have to at least recognize that they're interesting, like Eris, like, Zavala, Rip, Lance Reddick.
Yep.
Shax. I mean, there's, Mara and Aldrin, even if, most people want to pound his head against a wall for what he did to Cade. But I mean, he's back as the Crow, as some amnesia.
How fun.
But yeah, there's just so many interesting characters. And of course, Saint 14, even Osiris and Akora is a little bland, but it's whatever. Of course, you have the great, omnipresent Rahul. Who can forget the greatest Cryptarch in all the land?
Oh, you're not wrong.
Who's evidently in the new season is getting his own leveling rewards track. So basically all exotic
That's
stuff
all that matters.
go to him.
He's the only one. What's the...
I'm hoping he wears a princely looking robe with nothing underneath and can just stand there in the tower and look grand and mighty.
Who's the robot that's been wiped 44 times? What's his name?
Oh, Banshee 44.
Banshee 44.
He's probably the best, actually.
Well, he does.
He's so gruff.
He gives you the best stuff, ultimately. Yeah. When's the last time you got a valuable Cryptarch from Raoul? Unless they've changed something, but I just remember you go to him to get... I guess God rolls you could, but...
well, it's mainly like prime engrams and
right, but you
exotic engrams that you get.
Decent stuff from that, but Banshee, he's where it's at. I like him. Well, it's going to be kind of our look at our beginnings with Destiny 2, and the Destiny universe. Next episode is going to be another Destiny episode among whatever else we talk about at the beginning. And that focus is going to be more on where the game's at currently. So, and that's going to largely be directed by you as I'm not currently playing it. But I think in order to talk about that next episode, we will end up kind of setting the stage of where we were when we stopped playing to then where you are now. And that'll be kind of that era. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the third episode is going to be where we are currently to what is coming with the final shape plus beyond. And of course, that's all going to be speculation. Maybe we'll talk about what we hope we would see at some point. But yeah, so
in a possible Destiny 3, it's always fun speculation.
It really is,
especially with a lot of, like, when you look at the game, and most people that most podcasters that I've listened to that are basically Destiny podcasters, most streamers that I've listened to, like, are the great Astacross, or he's
your homie.
He's my go-to for all the meta. But he all of the different Destiny people are basically, it's the general summation of all Destiny 2 for the most part is the game is great, the lore is great, the story generally is pretty great, although they could probably do... There's always something, for me, it's always a little too episodic in parts. Like, it's just like, and here comes the traveler. Oh, wait, and we're going to take a side road down this wacky little lane and have a pirate adventure. It's like, okay,
I loved that dungeon, though, Shiloh. That was a fun one.
Yeah, with a grasp of avarice. The loot cave one.
The loot cave.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun, I suppose, but I think there's always a little, there could be room for improvement, or at least they have all this great lore, but just kind of put it in the game more than putting it in grimoire books. Like, oh, this is hard. I don't know how my dad did this for 30-something years as a weatherman.
Thank you.
But yeah, pointing to a green screen of a map where states don't even exist and just going, man, it's backwards. I don't know how he did that. Man's a wizard. I am the son of a wizard.
You are. Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's at the end of the day. But then they
have all these problems with these weird contradictory things. And the gunplay is great. The combat is fun. They have all this great stuff, but there's always something that they just don't quite get right, and that kind of
it brings down the whole experience.
Like they sunset, then they unsunset, and then they sunset again, and it's like the Earth and the Moon, everything going haywire, and they just don't know exactly. They can't really make up their minds on some stuff, and get a little wishy-washy, I think, at times. But other than that, and this is all stuff that we can speculate for Destiny 3. Like, hey, just come up with a plan. Stick with the plan. If the plan doesn't work, maybe alter it then, but don't kind of flip-flop plans. It's like if a restaurant has a menu and then just goes, you know what? Nah, just rips up the menu. And then, we were a French, bistro. Now we're just going to do tacos and tequila. It's like, what?
And
wait,
sushi.
what?
And you're like, what?
Yeah, no. What's going on here? But yeah. Other than that, I personally love the game.
Yep.
Just has its moments. Kind of pulls you in, and then you just kind of go. After a while, you're like, I don't know about you, and you just kind of. Maybe I need a little space, darling, and kind of push it to the side a little bit, and get a little breathing room, and then kind of go back and say, well, I don't know, maybe that was good times back then. And kind of jump in again, and then kind of fall back, and it's kind of a constant ebb and flow. So I kind of have to work on that, and that's most of the Destiny community, I think, is really like that. They'll take breaks, and it's just hard to play and what they would call an MMO, that's a first-person looter shooter, consistently like that without more content. Like, I think that was why the sunsetting was such a big deal. It's like, if you're going to have this big MMO like Guild Wars 2, like WoW, like ESO, you got to have a lot going on so you keep people invested for periods of time, rather than just, looter shooter mentality where it's like, okay, I have all the guns that I possibly could ever want. My vault is completely full. Yeah. My gear is all masterworked. I'm tired of doing Strikes, Gambit, and Crucible over and over and over and over again. So I think I'll take a break. You don't really have that problem in a lot of these MMOs because they have so much content. So hopefully in Destiny 3, they'll look at that.
Or they'll figure out a way to combine Destiny 1 and 2 into a whole experience, and then go from the end point and start anew, and then you'll have all this stuff to work through if you want. But that is a concept,
a whole other ball of wax
for another episode. Shiloh, I was going to thank you for coming on the show, but you do it every week.
You're welcome. So. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yes, thank you. Listener, we thank you for listening to us and just allowing us time to share our thoughts on whether Destiny 2 or Helldivers or whatever the video game flavor of the week is. We hope to hear from you, whether on Twitter or maybe Discord, and we will talk to you in the next episode.
Yep. Later, everyone.
Peace.
Questing the Multiverse is brought to you in part by Coniff Productions, Hal's Wood Designs, and Joel Crawford. To follow along with our adventures, please follow us on Twitter at QTM Podcast and consider joining our Discord, a link of which can be found in the show notes or in our Twitter bio. Want your questions or comments read on the show? Email us at questingthemultiverse@gmail.com. Finally, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving us a review or a follow wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for listening.